This film is devoted to one of America's most notable painters, Andrew Wyeth, who had been painting for over 50 years in only two places, Chadds Ford, Pennsylvania, where he was born, and in Maine, his summer house. In 1980, the Royal Academy in London held an exhibition of his work. It was the first time they'd given an exhibition to a living American artist. At the age of 62, Wyeth gave an exclusive interview about this work.
I have young people, artists come to me, or not only young, but all ages, and they'll say, well, I used to paint realistically, but I got to the bottom of it, and that's why I turned to abstraction. And I often think to myself, yes, they got to the bottom of their own depth of character, but not to the subject.
I liked Andrew Wyeth's paintings for a long time, but when I suggested doing him, there was general, oh dear, not Andrew Wyeth. He was so unfashionable. He was radically unfashionable. And New York had taken over in a big way, especially in American painting. Had taken over both in the work itself and in the people who explained the work. Anyway, somebody like Andrew Wyeth, who was a realist, mid-America, worked in tempera like the Renaissance artists, was quiet in his colors, was out of it. He was a non-starter. He couldn't care less about his place in the scheme of things. There was that about him that basically said, look, I'm just getting on with it, and I don't matter very much. It's the paintings that matter.
My father came here in 1903 to study under the illustrator Howard Pyle. And he fell in love with this country. And of course, I was born here. My father did the classics, Stevenson and James Fenimore Cooper. That's where he was a remarkable father in that he believed that he knew I was going to be a painter or an artist or an illustrator. He wasn't certain, but he often said, it's so important for a child that is going to be creative to have a life alone. That's why he was against college education for a painter. My other brothers and sisters were off at school, and I was left alone. So I wandered these hills and these woods and the brooks and the country and really got to know it intimately. My interest in Kerners really started as a small boy because of my interest in the First World War, which I was born just as Americans entered the war in 1917. And finding Carl was a machine gunner in the German army. And of course, I knew his kids and played with them. But his telling me stories wasn't just a Pennsylvania farmer to me. I mean, I'll be there alone in that house and all of a sudden a shot will ring out. And it's Carl maybe hunting deer or maybe he was just target practicing. To be in that house alone and the marvelous rich smell of sausage cooking permeated the air. I felt so strong about the ceilings and the hook. And I worked on that, how I was going to do him. I made drawings of him in profile. I made drawings. I worked on quite a long time, and then one day I realized, oh my God, I must look by his head up to the ceiling. I want to get that feeling that you might even be talking with him. Maybe you're going by him to those hooks, which also to me expressed his rather Germanic power, sharpness. I wanted to get it to the essence of the man. He said, that's awfully severe. But this is the way I felt about him, and actually I was right because he was severe. I learned a lot by that painting. I hadn't done any portraits up to that time, and I lost my father in an accident right near where Kerners lived. And I regretted so that I hadn't done his portrait.
When the steam train went down, he got hit there one day, was something that was very sad. But we heard the whistle every day, but that day they said nobody blew the whistle.
I think that it changed me from just painting pictures into painting a reality with an edge, with a meaning. His death really gave me a meaning to paint. And I think having him taken away so quickly and abruptly, it really jolted me. Then I did one called Winter 1946 of a boy running down the hill, which is related to the whole thing. See, I aimed to stay around that location of where he was killed. It took on a strange quality of color to me, mood, which I still retain to this day. It's always cool to go in the summertime into a milk shed like that with that constantly running water from that spring up on the hill, and the trickle of that water. There's something awfully brutal about the thing, although it's a charming farm interior. You think of harshness, New York City in the nighttime with cars going by or something, but the silence of the city. Well, this is the silence of the country. I thought that's some of the best painting in it, I think, the cup, that almost transparent feeling. You notice the cup is still there, isn't it?
He's very precise. His detail is absolutely perfect. It's a bit like Dürer or someone like that. So he manages to sort of imbue something like a bucket or a log or a pond or just someone's face with immense sort of kind of interest. So, and it makes you look at it from then on in a different way, which I think is what art's all about. So I think he very skillfully kept in the sort of the same territory most of his life. I think he never really tried to go out and become a sort of world painter. He painted his world very, very carefully and time again and took such care over it. So I think it's just, it makes you look at objects which seem to be kind of quite ordinary in a much more sort of interesting and interested way.
I saw the light in the window. Carl was, Kerner Sr. was ill at the time, and that light was on late at night, although I saw this in the early spring evening. I guess it was March, I think it was done in. If you notice, in the watercolor, there's little buds coming out on the trees just before it breaks. And the dampness of the dam with the overflow and a certain rich succulence in the thing that I was after, in that stone white building reflecting the moon coming up as you notice the wall of the house. I've left out some windows because I wanted to bring that feeling of reflected light. I'd worked on his figure in that for, well, actually a year and a half. I kept going back and working on it. And then I thought, first I thought, well, I'll put these trophies because that's the room I did it in. And one day Mrs. Kerner came up, Anna Kerner came up and said, in German, I could understand, she said, why didn't you come for dinner? I called you. And she looked at him severely. And he spoke back in very harsh terms. And I thought, oh my God, there it is. That's a whole portrait of their life with his rifle aiming right toward her, blow her head off. And I'd already painted in a moose head, which was lousy. Didn't work. So I sanded it off, which became part of the wall, as you notice. I was there at the right moment. Imagine if I hadn't been there. Don't you see how important it is to be in a surrounding and breathe it? And then it happens, if you're lucky, and you're perceptive enough to catch it. People will say to me, I don't know how you can paint in a place that has split level houses and these high wires of the Philadelphia Electric Company going across a landscape. Actually, it doesn't bother me because it's something much deeper than that I'm after. I'm not here to record this day and age. I'm only recording what I have felt about certain things. I work a great deal from memory of my childhood is what I'm trying to say.
Didn't know what time it was, the lights were low, oh, oh. I leaned back on my radio, oh, oh. There's a starman waiting in the sky. He'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks
It's right in front of you. Bleu de Chanel, le parfum.
Well, I wear my clothes like this because I can. And I wear my hair like this because I can. And I walk around like this because I can. And I do my thing like this because it's who I am. My body ain't sure, but just I know just where I'm going. Well, I do my thing.
I see so many photos that I just think, oh, I just would love to look like that again.
I've always struggled with my weight, but I've decided it's enough. It's time to fight back.
XLS Medical could help you lose up to 3 times more weight than dieting alone.
I've lost 18 pounds.
We've all lost weight with XLS Medical.
And now new XLS Nutrition, our healthy weight loss shake. Nutritionally complete, high in protein and B vitamins for energy release. Replace meals for healthy weight loss.
Tempera is a long, drawn-out thing of slowly building a great excitement when you've got this germ that you feel could be something. Tempera color, if you've ever looked at the pure pigments that I use, the beautiful qualities of color. Some come from India. Wherever I find a deposit of color, even some came from my brother-in-law's ranch, a beautiful ochre, and you keep it in jars with distilled water, and then you take it out and mix it on your palette with the yolk of egg, just the yolk, not the white. And you'll notice the way egg will stick to a plate when it dries. Well, this is what happens to tempera on a panel. Once it dries, you can take a scrubbing brush and you can't get that off. It's tough. It was an unusual situation of a brother and sister that lived in this remarkable house. And she was a great friend of Betsy's, my wife. First, I didn't have a studio at that time. We were building a house in Cushing. And I asked the Olsons whether I could use one of the upstairs rooms, which was deserted, and I did, and that was how it all started. I saw her crawling out to a little truck garden she had next to the house one day, and it dawned on me, what terrific, I mean. And I went into a room in the studio that I had painted in and made a quick notation of this idea of Christine, the field, the house in the background. And several days went by, and this kept building in my mind. I worked and worked and worked on just the field. It's like building a house and then living in it. I built the ground, thinking of her. And then when I put it, it was right. It just electrified me, you see, because I'd worked for months on this feeling of that pelt of the grass. And then finally, and I purposely held myself back for that moment. You know, timing is so important in painting when you do a thing. If you restrain yourself to the right moment, and if it can be the right moment, it makes all the difference in the world. That pink, like faded lobster shells that you find on the shore there.
Christina's world, I think, it works because it's rather an heroic composition. I think it's the slope upwards to the house, and the house seems to, again, epitomise something very American, the clapboard house, the first settlement you make, somebody on this alien land settling themselves down, building this simple but strong house. And then in front of it, this woman turned, looking towards it, and it's an epic setup. You don't quite know what's going on. It's ambiguous, so anyone can see what they want in it. And for a long while, I thought it was a young woman, and it was much, much later I realised it was a paraplegic, a crippled woman who could only sort of move herself around on her knees. I think because he painted and worked on a certain area, the lone figure out in the countryside, it was how Americans like to see themselves in some ways as the early settlers, you know. I think it's sort of he kind of gave them back that world.
Christine said I'd go anywhere as I wanted to, and I went up these dusty steps up to the 3rd floor. And I went into this room, and it was an August day, and it was very stifling hot. There were dead flies on the windowsill, and it was very still and very hot. So I went over, and I lifted the window, and all of a sudden, this frayed curtain that hadn't been any wind in there, air in there for probably 25, 30 years, lifted slowly, raised off the... I realized, my God, fantastic. That was that split second that I saw these frayed end sort of shivering in the wind. I mean, it wasn't a gale blowing outside. It was just sort of like a ghost lifting this thing off the dusty floor. And then it fluttered for just a few moments. And I saw that happen, and I realized what a terrific, well, I felt a cold chill go up the back of my spine, you know. I felt Christine was getting very old and decrepit. Her brother was dying of cancer. I wanted to do a portrait of the end of that house. Not just a painting of a house, but a portrait of a house. That's a bucket that he would take slop out, and he would always come out and walk down that path, you can see, towards me, and set it down and talk with me. It becomes more than a camera shot, because all the years that I knew Christine, it's a distillation of all those thoughts, trying to be put into one thing. See, that's what an artist can do if he feels the thing strong enough. It's your memory as it is, past, present, and future. Now, artists say to me, well, why don't you use cameras the way we do now? I mean, the artists go around with cameras and shoot things and then paint them from the studio and from the photographs. I said, I don't do that because the very fact of sitting in a location with an object, the spirit slowly, unconsciously seeps in. I may never look at the drawing again. I may take it home and into the studio and throw it on the floor. That's why a lot of my drawings have my foot marks from them. I may not ever refer to it again. But what I've gotten from the experience of being with the object lifts it beyond photographic realism or just a cold object.
It's fascinating that someone worked for so many years of his life, what it was sort of 60 or 70 years, in the same area, without feeling he had to go somewhere else, he had to go abroad, and he had to go to Paris, or he had to go to Rome, like most painters did at some point. He just stayed in the 2 rural areas of America and examined things with such care and with such expressiveness. You know, it's not just a bucket and it's not just a field, it's just someone running down a hill. There's something else going on, you know, there's something in the face, or the wonderful painting of Groundhog Day with just a plate, and it doesn't show anybody there. It's like someone's just left the room. And he is connected with this landscape. And I think the more you see it, the more you learn.
The bottom dropped out, really, and then Siri came into the thing. She was sort of a rejuvenation of me as far as something young, vital, intense. Quite a contrast to Christine. Betsy had known her as a little girl, and I'd seen her along the road with her marvelous Finnish father with this bald head, very brown, amazing man, carrying her when she was about 6 years old. And then I met her when she was 12, and then Christine died, and it was sort of a rebirth. One morning when I was drawing her and beginning the painting, I'd drawn it in and was working on the thing like mad. The sun came out and hit the top of her head through the little lights above the doorway, the barn door, and it just electrified the thing. And it passed. The sun came out and then disappeared, became dark. And then it would come out, and I had to work with lightning speed to catch that momentary flicker of gleaming gold of her hair. Painting, to me, is a matter of truth and maybe your memory of what it is. And finally, if a painting is good, it'll be mostly memory.
When he had the exhibition at the Royal Academy, I think he's the first American contemporary painter to have had an exhibition at the Royal Academy. It was quite well received here, but the paintings were very modest for the Royal Academy. And yet, A, if anybody deserved to be there, he did. And B, they were part of his statement that he was in the Academy, but absolutely not of it. He hadn't done anything to accommodate himself to it. He was quietly put there, and that was the world as he saw it. And it is a world of reality that many, many Americans, and beyond America now, recognize as a world which carries a lot of truths.
I'm really painting my own life, my own doubts, purely a personal expression.